where the heck did it go? I can't seem to find anything interesting about this comic. Today we're looking at issue 1 of Underheist by Maria and David Lapham. This is pretty obviously a heist story, but what makes it different from other heist stories is that the characters in this story are trying to pull a heist on other characters who are trying to pull their own heist. So it's like a double heist. I don't pick up every single new issue 1 that I see on the stand, but I did pick up this one because I like the cover a lot. The layout is really nice. It looks like a movie poster, and there's a lot going on here, and it says a lot about the story. After I've read it, I can see all the references on the cover to the story within. But just like you might say this cover seems a bit too busy, the story in this first issue is way too busy. There's too much going on in too little space. There are flashbacks that are kind of confusing, interactions between characters that don't seem super necessary, and they're also kind of confusing. Considerable amount of planning for a heist that's just heisting another heist. And then the actual heist happens in the first issue, and it doesn't go very well, but then the heist is done. The heist failed, so what's the rest of the series about if it's not about the heist? The issue is supposed to be setting you up for what looks like a supernatural storyline, but any hint of supernatural stuff is very, very vague. The main character has this marking on his neck that was put there by a guy he owes money to, and it was scarred over at the very beginning, but then he spent the whole issue picking at it, and at the very end it looks kind of red and bloody. And I think that's supposed to tell us that something supernatural is happening, but it could just be that he picked all his scabs off and now it's bloody. I don't know. I think overall the characters in this issue are kind of underdeveloped. Nobody seems really unique. Nobody seems really interesting. I definitely don't find myself just caring about any of the characters. The pacing is kind of weird. There's a lot of setup before we get to the actual heist, and a lot of those scenes feel kind of unnecessary, especially this part where the main character can't sleep, so he goes and sleeps on the street like a homeless person so that he can apparently surveil this other guy and follow him, but he doesn't actually try to follow him, and suddenly his hat disappears, so because the art is not very detailed, you can't really tell if it's still the same guy. And then we have these two panels which look like they might be a flashback over there, which are explained much later, but at this point in the comic they're just confusing, and the transition between this page and this page is just very awkward, and you have no idea what's going on. And I guess it's explained later what was going on, sort of, but really all of the setup in this issue could have been done in like 5 pages. And then maybe we would have had more time to actually explain the weird relationships these characters have, because they're confusing and vague. As a whole, the dialogue is generally not that colorful, it's not that interesting, it gets the point across, but you don't feel like you're reading unique people. And some of the dialogue, combined with the choice of moment that we see in each of the panels, just feels very stiff. Throughout this comic, they have pretty much 8 panels on every single page, which is a lot of panels to have on a page, especially the whole way through. And because there are so many panels on each page, the art doesn't really get a chance to breathe. Not that I think David Lapham's art would really breathe if you gave it a chance to breathe, because it's very underwhelming art in general. It's very flat and two-dimensional. You don't really get a sense of the space they're in. Their faces are kind of oversimplified. The emotion comes through, but not very complex emotion. In general, the whole comic feels pretty DIY. It feels very low budget. And it's not just the poor pacing and the poor dialogue and the boring characters and the way too many panels on a page that make it feel DIY. It's also the lettering, which is hand-drawn, and it's got variable sizes throughout that don't feel like they're programmed to be consistent. They just feel like someone drew it all and didn't bother sticking to any rules. And as far as the cliffhanger goes, we have the weird scar on the guy's neck that may or may not be supernatural, and we have this giant hole in the subways that may or may not be bottomless. But honestly, there's not a lot of reason to believe that the hole is anything weird, and there's also no reason for us to think they're going to try to figure out what's up with this hole. So at the end of the issue, we're kind of left with no direction. The heist is over, it failed, the guy didn't get the money to pay off his debts, his life is still gonna suck. That's really all we know at the end of the issue. So I figured I would keep this one brief. There's honestly not that much that I like about it. The premise is cool. The idea of doing a heist on someone else while they're doing a heist is kind of fresh. It's a fresh new take on a heist story. But when you add up everything else about the comic, it just comes out to a boring experience, and there's nothing really new here. So I'm giving issue 1 of Underheist a 4 out of 10. Maybe there's something about this that I'm failing to appreciate, something I didn't notice, some kind of knowledge I don't have that would make me like it more. I don't know. If you read it and you liked it, I would love to know why. Or, if you're on the creative team for this book and you have some insight that might make me appreciate it more, I would love to hear it. Let me know. Today's question doesn't exist. Nobody asked me any questions. Oh well!